Welcome to the Robotics and Automation Theater sponsored by DC Velocity Magazine. My next presenter we have behind me is Andy Williams, Executive Vice President, Sales for Exotec, and he'll be focusing on how robotics is disrupting warehouse fulfillment with disruption-proof automation. So how may I have a round of applause for Andy Williams?
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the second day of ProMat. Hope you're having a good time so far. It seems like a busy scene here, a lot of people. I'm going to talk to you today about how robotics is protecting against volatility in the future and how it differs compared to a traditional automation. Before I get started, Andy Williams, I'm the Executive Vice President of Sales in North America for Exotec. We are based in Atlanta in North America, and our global headquarters is in Lille, France. I am going to take some questions at the end of the session, so if you could save your questions till then, and please ask them. And I thought we could start off with just a little audience participation here. Could you please raise your hand if you've experienced any challenges in the area of labor in the past 2 years? All right. What about inflexible storage? Has anyone seen challenges in this area? I see a few hands. How about growing customer expectations through the COVID pandemic or the rebound effect from COVID? See a few hands there. Rapid changes in customer demand resulting from ridiculous social media posts or changes in retail supply chain requirements. Got a couple there as well. So we're going to talk about those today in a little bit more detail. So labor challenges, we hear it every day. Everybody's talking about it. It's a real thing, and there are some different types of labor challenges out there, right? It's true that on a macro level, there's a shortage of workers in the warehouse. In specific areas, it's even worse. I remember some projects we did in Indianapolis years ago. Indianapolis just happens to be the perfect sweet spot for two-day small parcel in the United States. UPS and many other big retailers have all of their DCs around that area. And for that peak period, they all get into a war on labor and decide to add bonuses for their employees. And the labor force you had last week may switch overnight to your competition as a result of a $500 sign-on bonus. It's adding volatility and unpredictability to your labor planning. That's not the only issue. I think that when we talk about labor, it's also how can we do more with the existing labor pool we have? How can we get more productivity? How can we make their training ramp-up period easier and get them started and adding value more quickly? Inflexible storage. So, irrespective of your vertical, whether you're in wholesale, retail, or e-commerce, or a mix of all three, we've seen some big changes in this area, right? If you're a retail business in the past, it was big reserve storage areas, right, followed by active pick areas. That was attempted to be applied in e-commerce, right? But it's harder than it looks to balance all of those when you're rapidly changing your SKU assortment, when you're deciding to ship in different quantities to your regional distribution centers. And flexibility is paramount. If you're sticking to the same way you did things in the past, you will not be able to adjust when your supply chain strategy starts to shift towards providing smaller quantities to your stores, towards giving them the ability to add more SKUs, towards changing your mix of channel participation from 70% retail to 70% e-commerce. And when you design your storage system, you shouldn't have to look 5 to 10 years in the future and say, hey, I'm planning around 30 days on hand, 60 days on hand for a certain load unit type. Flexibility is absolutely critical, and being able to adapt. And the most successful retail and wholesale businesses out there are very, very nimble in this area, have recognized it, that they don't know what the future holds, and they need to be prepared for the unexpected. Growing customer expectations. You know, this has been really accentuated through COVID and the e-commerce boom. Before, 4 days, 5 days, delivery was okay. Now, if you can't deliver next day, you're potentially losing the order. So very rapid response times are critical. It's not just in e-commerce. We also have a shortage of labor in our stores, right? And to be able to keep them supplied with the right amount of product at the right time and the right quantities in a way that's easy for the store operators to merchandise, keep product on the shelf, and increase sales is increasingly critical. We've seen an incredible amount in general amongst all industries of SKU proliferation, right? This adds a tremendous amount of complexity when we're trying to meet these SLAs. Can add up to a lot of additional transactions inside the supply chain network and inside a warehouse. We've seen it in e-commerce. We've even seen this recently in the beer industry, you know, with a widely growing assortment of different types of beers. Whoever would have thought that we'd have, you know, different types of stouts and IPAs or whatever it is, but this is a general trend that's happening all over the place. Of course, it's easier to see in e-commerce when you know, you can have even a virtual brand or something that becomes hot essentially overnight as a result of social media posts. So you see that in rapid fashion businesses, but you also see that in normal apparel businesses, general retail. You have to be able to adjust quickly to the changing consumer behavior, be able to adapt your supply chain, get the right types of SKUs, the right products to the right people, your customers at the right time. Peak season is something that is definitely worth addressing. It's a phenomenon that I guess started, you know, 10, 15 years ago in e-commerce when it really got so big. But we've seen it continue, and you know, we're looking at peak to average ratios oftentimes in these businesses of 4 to 5x. So how do you handle that? You certainly can't easily scale your labor force up to all of a sudden be able to output 400 to 500% more. You know, how do you do that in your warehouse? So I think people have realized for the past 10, 15 years that automation can provide some of the answers to these challenges, right? And it's done a decent job. It's done a decent job. You know, it's so hard when you design these systems, right? In the past 10, 15 years, I can't tell you how many times I've been sitting down and working with customers on, let's guess at how much your SKU base is going to grow. Let's guess at what your order type mix is going to be 10 years from now. Let's guess at what the order profile will be, how many units per line you're going to be doing 5 years from now, 10 years from now, right? Oh, and now let's think about how that all translates to a conveyor system that has a tremendous number of constraints that we have to bake a lot of assumptions into. And I think robotics differs from traditional automation because it's much more flexible. It eliminates many of these constraints and can allow you to adapt and grow your business as you need. And it's much more resilient to volatility and uncertainty. So when I'm looking into the future, I don't have to hit the bullseye. I can just kind of, you know, hit a double 18 or a double 20, and that might be good enough. And I can adapt and I can adjust. I can scale, add capacity and storage and throughput as needed, which is very beneficial from a capital deployment aspect as well. We talk about robotics. What does it really mean? You know, these systems were so highly engineered, goods-to-person ASRS systems and other systems in the past, could be very high performance, but a lot of moving pieces. An army of electrical engineers and commissioning engineers coming in to fine-tune conveyors over months to get it working just exactly perfectly. And those days are largely gone. You know, the days of AutoCAD design work have become much easier when you don't have to worry about conveyor layouts and how to get all those interconnected pieces of the system, sorters, and everything else exactly correct. So there's a little bit of a liberation there that robotics provides, right? It really just comes down to now, what's your storage? What's your throughput? And you can already start to plan out a system. The elimination of all those interconnected subsystems and constraints that are a result of conveyors and other types of subsystems like lifts or the ability to only operate within a grid structure can be removed, right? And that's very, very powerful thing. When you think about capacity, you know, and we're designing these systems and making a capital request to support our supply chain network for the next 5 to 10 years, we're adding in that growth. We're adding in that, you know, forecast that kind of aligns with the business strategy. Here's the direction we're moving in from a product standpoint. But you know, I don't need to start out with that right away, right? Now in traditional automation, you certainly do, but with robotics automation, I can start today with the storage I need or the throughput I need and just scale it up as I go, right? And if my predictions were wrong, I can adjust. So it's much more simple. Robotics automation largely operates on completely standardized software. So the ramp-up time for these systems is reduced tremendously. It's no longer a period of fine-tuning everything with bespoke, customized code for months upon months to get everything working together. With these systems, you've got out-of-the-box software that's configurable and scalable, and you can go from go live to complete ramp-up in about a week. So a faster time to value is a big part of the equation with robotics as well. Not to mention relocatability. If I have various systems, various warehouses, and I assumed that, you know, Boston was going to be doing 100,000 lines a day and LA was going to be doing 50,000 lines a day, maybe I got it wrong. Maybe it was the other way around. Well, with robotic systems, I can redeploy and be more flexible, right? Again, back to this kind of thesis of being more nimble and more flexible and more resistant to volatility in the future. Back to labor. Back to labor. You know, it's very, very difficult to manage these warehouses, right? The training that is necessary to support traditional automation systems for the various disciplines. So how do I maintain the electromechanical? How do I maintain the PLC, the software system, right? I need specialists for all of these pieces. I need specialists to know how to operate the conveyor system, the sorter. I need experts in picking. And robotics provides an opportunity for you to come in and be effective in 5 minutes, right? There's not much to learn. So you can come in and be an effective operator and producer in the facility pretty much instantly, right? Without any extensive amount of training. And from a maintenance perspective, you don't need to have an army of specialists on your team to help support the system. Let's talk a little bit about flexibility and volatility. So, you know, what are the types of flexibility that we have to consider? One is certainly storage and throughput. It's a big one, very big one. Again, these systems can be designed in a completely modular fashion. But that's not the only type of flexibility that we're talking about. We may not know even the unit types that we need a year or two from now. We could be switching from each picking to carton picking or something else overnight as a result of all the uncertainty and volatility in the future. Our order profiles can change tremendously. So I could go from one line producing 10 units to 10 lines producing 1 unit overnight. What does that mean from a system standpoint? How quickly can you adapt? And robotic systems really don't care about order profile. They're executing commands. They're really focused on robotic transactions, bringing goods from one point to another. And they're very expandable, not only in storage and throughput, but also in the ways they interface with the rest of the system, or can be scaled up with additional picking stations or bin interfaces to other parts of the warehouse. All right, when we talk about growing customer expectations, you know, when we think about the past and what we used to do 10, 15 years ago in retail, for instance, you know, we had a whole day, we may have had a whole week to plan out orders for our stores. We could prepare, we could build huge batches, get a lot of efficiencies that way. And things have changed. You know, I think all of you know it, right? It's not just e-commerce where we need this quick reactivity, but also in retail and wholesale. And the ability to operate and to optimize your order pool, get all those efficiencies while still having a very, very fast SLA is paramount. So the ability to go from any storage location to any interface point in the rest of the system is absolutely critical. The ability to do it in less than 15 minutes is something that is table stakes for today. You don't want to be designing a system that takes hours to prepare from a software perspective or a mechanical perspective. You need to be able to respond quickly to changing demands. So when we think about the ability to handle this challenge right here, rapid changes in demand, and we talked about that challenge of peak season in e-commerce. What do you do with that? Well, if I have a robotic solution, I can bring in robots in additional capacity as needed, literally add it for the peak season, and not have to become kind of an HR company to go find a bunch of non-existent people, right? It's a big, big advantage. And when we think about how that impacts the ability to access all of these SKUs in relation to customer demand, it's very important in your system. You don't want to have experts, industrial engineers that are in your system trying to slot between reserve and active or based upon the velocity of different SKU categories. Because what happened yesterday is in the rearview mirror and not a very good predictor of what's going to happen tomorrow. So it's very important that you can access all of the product instantly and automatically, not having to have something that needs to be managed every single day. All right, so we talked about a few of these points earlier, but one of the ones we didn't discuss is the impact for operators. And when you're, not only can you come in as an operator and have a very quick learning curve, but a lot of these tedious tasks are done for you. So the tremendous amount of walking, the heavy lifting, it's a better option for your employees. They will be happier working at these stations. They will not have as many injuries. And that's a way to make sustainable performance over time available for your employees. It certainly attracts customer loyalty. When we look at the best performing companies that we see in our respective verticals, supply chain nimbleness and responsiveness is a recurring theme, translating directly to profitability and enabling them to capture more market share. We talked about reacting to shifting consumer behavior, and I'll emphasize that again. in different markets, even in wholesale markets. I remember a few years ago, all of a sudden, frozen pizza warehouses started going up all over the place, right? And we've all been a part of these big macro level changes that have happened over the past few years. I think everybody recognizes we have to be extremely flexible when we're thinking about how to take advantage of robotics automation and increase our productivity towards the future. So, that's the end of my presentation. I'd love to open it up for any questions, if anybody has one.
Can you make those robotic systems work alongside the traditional automation systems and in a pretty seamless manner?
I couldn't quite hear it, so I'm just going to walk down here.
Can you make those robotic systems work seamlessly alongside some of the legacy automation projects? Okay,
the question was, can robotic systems work seamlessly alongside legacy automation? And the answer is yes. Yeah. A great example of this recently, we did a returns project, and it was a big warehouse, had a relatively mature, well-running legacy automation system, but they were struggling with returns. And we were able to successfully deploy one of our systems to provide an elegant solution that was really just its own standalone system in a warehouse. It was able to interface to those legacy automation systems from a physical and software standpoint, no problem at all. That's just one example. Go ahead.
Good morning. Obviously, there's different kinds of robotics out there, but what sort of throughput, lines per hour, pick rates have you been able to achieve? What's really the high end?
Yeah, great question. So, really on the aggregate level, from a throughput and storage standpoint, there's really not a limit on it. We've done systems 15, 20,000 lines an hour. It's very high density storage. So systems can be 500, 600,000 tote locations or more. When you look at productivity, you've got different types of productivity, right? One is certainly at the pick station. And when we think just notionally how that could improve, we can see a 5x or 6x performance versus manual picking certainly at the station. But that's not all of it. You have a lot of creative things you can do with these systems, right? One of the most beautiful ones for those of us that have been doing goods to person systems is the ability to complete the order at the station. So removing completely the unit sortation process and order completion process downstream can add a tremendous amount of labor savings by reducing packing. We also can do other functions. For instance, the storing and buffering of orders, and then automatically releasing them to the dock when it's required. So a lot of different labor savings can be achieved not only through a head-to-head kind of productivity comparison, but also in the logistics flows of the system. All right.